Hi, I'm Alyssa Cole, author of A Princess in Theory, and you're watching Author's Voice.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Author's Voice, where we connect our authors to the world. This is Lit with Love, and I am your host, Sonali Dev. And I have with me today my friend and one of my favorite authors and all-around badass, Alyssa Cole. Hi Alyssa, thanks for being here. And we're going to be discussing her beautiful book, A Princess in Theory, which is from Avon, from HarperCollins, and it is $7.99. And you can order a signed copy right now by going to authorsvoice.net and and using the buy button there. You can do that anytime during the show. You can also send us live questions for Alyssa. And thank you again for being here. Let me see if I've missed anything. If you're on Facebook Live, you can put the questions directly into the comments. If you're watching this on YouTube after the show, you can still buy a book from authorsvoice.net. Again, thank you for being here. And hi, Alyssa.
Hi.
Alyssa, it is also release day today.
It is.
So yay!
So this is our little release day
This
party.
is our release party. Yay!
Yay.
This is our make-believe champagne. and I know, the book is just everything I think Alyssa ever writes is incredibly smart, very relevant, very timely. And this book is no exception. And I will have you tell our viewers a little bit about it and take us into the show, and then we'll get in and talk about it some more.
Okay, sounds good. So to just give a little background, the book is basically about an overworked graduate student. She's a public health graduate student studying epidemiology, and she's also a waitress, and she also works in a lab. So she's, like many young people right now, very overwhelmed, trying to make ends meet and trying to get herself settled in her career. She also grew up in the New York City foster care system, so she was never adopted, and she kind of lives on her own. She has her best friend Portia, but she's kind of developed a thick skin and kind of learned that you can only really depend on yourself, which a lot of people think that, but if you're a romance reader, you know that that's really a self-protection mechanism. So that will be dealt with eventually in the story. So she starts getting these spam mails saying from the kingdom of Thessalos, saying that she is the betrothed to the prince, the heir to the throne of Thessalos, and they have finally found her, and all she needs to do is send them her information so they can verify that it's actually her. And she's pretty street smart, and also she's overworked and annoyed, and she thinks that this is spam. And finally, she keeps ignoring it, and finally she responds, "Fuck off, leave me alone." Now, in reality, it's not spam. She is actually.
It's not spam.
She is actually exactly. She is the actual betrothed of the heir to the throne of Thessalos. Her family fled when she was a child, and no one ever knew what happened to them. And through the Prince Taviso, and his assistant Lakotsi, his assistant is very handy, and she has I won't reveal how, but she found Naledi in New York City, and he's going there for to do Prince stuff, like go to the UN and have meetings and do
Throw
business
some
stuff.
money around.
So he discovers that she's there, and he decides, okay. And like he has at the beginning, he's kind of jerky. He's a spoiled prince. He's the only child, and he but he also is under a lot of pressure from his parents to get married, from his people to lead them well, knowing that he's the only one that will be able to take his country forward. And so, kind of on a whim, he had asked his assistant to look for this woman, and then he finds her. When he goes to meet her, she thinks he's her new coworker at the restaurant, Jamal, who Thabiso has dispatched with some money. And so he kind of goes along with playing the pauper role, and they get to know each other under false pretenses of him pretending for half of the book she thinks he's Jamal. And, this then eventually the truth comes out, but also, which is, a really hard moment for her, who has finally decided to trust someone. But now she also is being provided the opportunity to learn about her past, where she's really from, about her family, and also there is an epidemiological situation going on in Thessalo that he kind of uses to help bring her back to her country, and that she uses as an excuse to go see what's going on there. And along the way they fall in love and have fun, and
Really?
The usual.
So it's a classic fairy tale, but you have all the stuff you throw in to unpack, which is all the themes of home, belonging, all of that. And we'll come back and talk about that some. But one of the most unique things about this book is that Naledi, and I know you and I say that differently, is a STEM heroine, which is which is just great. For a long time in my life, I was a science math person. I can't even imagine how that happened. But it's and she's not just like, oh, she's a STEM heroine. Everything about the way she thinks, how analytical she is, the way she approaches any problem, all of that is just so one kind of mental training, and you do it so well. So tell me what your background is, and are you a STEM girl? Where does that come from?
I was an English major, but my first job that I got, well, my second job that I got out of after college was working for a scientific journal. And I was a copy editor, and I eventually became a production editor, but I basically spent over a decade reading scientific research about immunology and all of these different things that I didn't know about, and I had never taken a science lab in college or anything, although I did have friends who were, doing pre-med or bio and stuff like that. And so I was reading this stuff every day, kind of just ingesting it every day. And I do really also enjoy science, not particularly the stuff I was reading because it wasn't made for laymen, but I always have enjoyed learning about science, in the different aspects, like astronomy and biology and all of just whatever is interesting. But with Letty, I was finally able to kind of use all of this stuff I had been learning or absorbing over the years. And for me also it was really important to have a Black STEM heroine, because I've seen if you're on social media and you're following scientists and see kind of different things going on, they're really, within the sciences, there is first the issue of women in sciences who are treated much differently than their male colleagues. And then when it comes to women of color, there's a whole other area of the different ways that they are treated. So while I wanted the book to be a romantic comedy and funny and fun, I did also want to address some of the things that would come up for someone pursuing this kind of career. For me, I didn't particularly have to deal with that stuff because I worked in an environment that was 98% women. So
yes, and we continue to in romance to
yes, and then I switched over to romance, or moved into romance. So but even the men that I did have to deal with would be annoying at certain points in a way that I knew they wouldn't be, or male coworkers getting even though there would be one or two of them, it would still be oh yeah, that's a great idea, and that's well, that's what some
woman just said
yeah,
3 seconds ago.
So, the small things that add up, and that I'm sure if someone is working in an actual lab or, going to the classes every day and having to deal with professors and just seeing things that women were talking about, it was just something I wanted to address. And I also kind of wanted to, one other thing was that, like, outside of the job even, I had made friends with many researchers just by chance. And like when a lot of times in movies and in books, when you see people, the portrayal of researchers is always like this super nerdy person with no social skills and who like they are so focused on their work that they can't think of anything else. And while Letty is very focused on her work, she does have an outside life, and she has social skills too. Like, so I kind of, and some people I spoke to as I was writing it, they were like, please don't make her like, just this hapless, oh, I can't do anything, I can't talk to men because I'm a scientist. And I was like, no, I will really try to avoid that, because no one I knew who was a researcher behaved in that way. Obviously, because there's a whole gamut of human experiences, some researchers are like that, but people like that are in every profession. So I just also wanted to kind of move away from
that stereotype.
Yeah.
I'm currently writing a very brilliant heroine who has no social skills.
I will say, no, there is a difference between not having social skills, and if you've read my other stuff, you know that I enjoy that very much.
Yes.
But for this particular one, I just didn't want to portray that particular thing. But I do love reading that particular
Okay,
trait
good.
in people.
But it's for one, the whole subtle and non-subtle sexism in both academia and STEM, I think, comes through really well, where at every point she's having to do twice the work, 5 times the work, 10 times the work. The whole, also, and we'll come back hopefully and talk about, the personality of being orphaned and, basically in search of home or belonging, where you'll do anything to fit in, and she's perpetually working so much harder than everyone else. And that's kind of, I think, thematically relevant to being a woman and being a colored person in science and, in any new field. And that's just really well done, despite the fact that it is a romantic comedy and it is fun and it's very much a fairy tale. But you don't shy away from this stuff, and that's just fabulous. And also, I think, although she is brilliant and, and she is a scientist and a researcher, she's also waitressed for such a long time in her life. And that is a people's profession, and so naturally she's extremely socially adept, right? So there's that, and I think that works really well.
And I did base some of that. So I waitressed throughout college, and part of that is partially based on I used to waitress at the Princeton Institute of Advanced Study, which is where Einstein and all of those people. So this one thing everyone was always extremely nice. But these people were like so brilliant that sometimes the most basic thing would not even faze them or like come to mind. Like, I had accidentally spilled water on someone. They did not even notice. Didn't notice me clean the water up. Because like hyperfocus, which is something that you need if you're a researcher at that level. But even in their daily life, it could become a thing. And I also just kind of wanted to do an homage, because I really did enjoy working there and getting to listen to people's conversations and stuff. So
that's great. That whole institute she works at, and how she's almost in awe of the people who are there and working, because it's just fabulous. But the other side of having a hyper competent, and there's a lot of hyper competent women. Lakotsi is, and she is. The other side of it is a very feminist hero. Now, you said he's a jerk. I mean, I don't think he's.
I mean, he's like a jerk light. And then on the side, he's a cinnamon roll.
Right. He's completely a cinnamon roll. Do you mean gooey on the inside? Is that what you mean?
I've just been, on Tumblr too much, but yes.
Because I have no idea what that means. But he certainly tastes like a cinnamon roll. Oh, he's extremely delicious.
That too. That way too, yes.
Yes, and But he's such a classic, and this is totally my weakness in romance, is this, he's absolutely a feminist hero, right? He's very, very comfortable with hypercompetence in women. He is, unerringly respectful of his mother. Even when she is being a bit of a, a bit difficult, he's extremely respectful of her while still standing up for himself. So that whole thing, so when you're creating these pairings, I know that different authors come at it differently, but you have this pairing of this feminist hero with this hyper competent heroine. And so tell me about let's talk about your process a little bit. Like, how does the story start? How do you find your way around it?
Well, the basis for this story was I started getting a lot of spam mail at work. And I was like, what? And at the same time,
maybe you are a princess, Alyssa.
Actually, I have to show this to you later. Like a month ago, I got a DM, and it was like, greetings from the royal family of Dubai.
No.
I will show it to you later. And I was like, wait a minute. Because sometimes I write things and like weird stuff happens. Unfortunately, it can be like neo-Nazis, and that's not cool. But like, I was like, what if I'm secretly betrothed? And so I was like, hello. And then they said, how is your day going? And I said, oh, this is just a scammer. This isn't a real thing.
Did you really actually get back to them?
Well, I just said hello because I was like, what's going on? And then it was just someone pretending to be.
Dick pictures.
No, surprisingly not. They just said, how are you doing? And I didn't respond. And they were like, all right. So, maybe it is really the prince of the prince from Dubai, but I'm doubting it. But yes, I got some spam mail, and I was like, saw some other thing about like people who got this ridiculous spam mail and basically ruined their entire lives, like giving all of their money to claim this like African heritage, and these people should not have fallen for the scam. That's all I'll say. I don't know why they believed it at all. But like so that combination of what if this really was true, and also but the fact that it usually 99.9% of the time it's not going to be true.
Yes.
And especially someone who thinks logically is not going to fall for that. But at the same time, is a part of her that wishes it was true, because we all have that. Like if you get some amazing thing in the mail, you would say, yes, that would be awesome if that was true. And like what would happen if it actually was, and how would she deal with it, and how would that affect her life and her future?
Yeah, and it is a person specifically. And so let's jump a little bit and talk about that theme of home. And she's, she has these issues where she's been orphaned young, and then she's been handed off. And you do a really good job of doing that whole Velcro metaphor, defective Velcro, which is great. But it is basically a person who feels so rootless that she's even suppressed some of the memories from her childhood. And so home and orphaning, and so there's this hole inside her that's more pronounced than in people who don't have that hole. And so then it fits right in, right, that you can be scammed. So vulnerability.
Yeah, and so I was thinking about that because I think everyone at a certain point has had that feeling of like, I don't really belong somewhere. And I was thinking about how it would be kind of magnified for someone who really has had that reinforced over and over again, just by, not because anything was actually wrong with her, but just because none of the foster families worked out, and at the end she ended up aging out and becoming successful on her own, and which also that's sadly not also always the case, because people don't receive the support that they need when they leave these programs all the time. Even I go a little bit into that, but like I can't make it a whole treatise about social work and like how social workers are not given the things that they need to help people. That's a different book. But so for her, I kind of wanted to highlight the fact that like there can be things that are completely beyond your control, but that still impact you so deeply, even if you try to pretend that it doesn't. And like I honestly have heard from like several people about the Velcro thing, and like which made me not happy. I'm not happy that people feel like that, but I'm glad that it resonated with people, and hopefully the end result, which is obviously that no, nothing is wrong with you, and that eventually you find someone who sticks. And sometimes you already have people who stick who you were not even, you're so invested in this idea that, well, no, of course no one could care for me, that you're not even seeing the people who are already there who do care for you. So.
Right, which is also, I mean, which is the whole, you know, there's female best friendships, which I think is a very strong thing with romance and is a strong thing in your books. And with Portia, she has, she struggles with her, you know, wanting to, her natural bond with Portia. She struggles with it, right? To a point where you're saying, I mean, come on, right? But there's a reason why she struggles, and Portia gives her a lot of reason to struggle and try to self-preserve. She's a bit of a mess, and Naledi is not at all, you know, in the same terms. She's a different kind of mess. So, you know, these are romance heroines, so they are messes. So we all know that we're not messes. But so the whole best friends, girlfriends, and you know, bonds between women is also kind of a theme because it's generational. There's his mother and her mother were best friends, and I thought that was. You know, that was really well done, that it's reflected, and she kind of learns, you know, to forgive at 2 generations, you know, in 2 layers.
Yeah, for that, like for me, when I'm writing books, I always generally really enjoy writing the friendship aspect too, because I feel like, you know, sometimes with certain books, they, like for example, a slimmer Harlequin book, you don't really have the word count to really go that deeply into other friendships, although some people do manage it. But I feel like it is, for me as a reader, I enjoy reading about friendships as well. So, and when I write, I try and, because I feel like if you focus too heavily on one relationship, in real life too, that other things falter, and that I feel like, to me, I honestly feel like some friendships can be so much more impactful than even a romantic relationship, and also that they don't always get the respect that they deserve. Because, like, for example, if you've ever lost a good friend or a best friend, it's the most awful feeling. It can be worse than getting dumped. And you never get to recover from it, because like people don't come and go, oh, you and whoever broke up, that's sad, let's go get it. Yeah, because it's just like, oh, it was your friend, whatever. You'll make more friends, but it's not. No. But like, so I think I kind of wanted to talk about that too, like how friendships also need work and nurturing, and can also become, you know, codependent and not great, and just like a romantic relationship, and they need to be worked on, and you know, people need to have boundaries and also figure out how they both work, how they work best together, just like a hero and heroine or whatever the coupling have to figure out how they work best together, because with their balance needs to be good in any relationship that you're having.
Yeah, and it makes you a whole person.
Yes.
You know, having all these various relationships, and that's why even families, you know, I mean, a hero who's close to his parents, who understands where they're coming from and all of that, you know, it makes for a whole person. And then having a foil of someone who doesn't have that, or could have had that and has been kept from it, it just kind of adds layers and magic to it. I have to also say, when we were talking about him being a feminist hero, that you have a hero who sneaks romance novels and reads Mills and Boone. I don't think I've ever seen that. And I was like, yes.
One thing I wanted, because Lady is kind of the more logical one, I saw her as someone who would probably not be super into romance novels. And I know this is something that, like, I didn't want to hurt. In my headcanon, she's not someone who would be like, oh, you read romance novels? That's stupid. But she wouldn't be someone who would go to a store and see a romance novel and pick it up, because also that would be self-protection for her. She doesn't necessarily want to read about happy endings if she doesn't believe that she can have one for herself. And for Thabisa, I kind of wanted him to be I imagined him as a very curious child, and he was the only child. You know, he had people in the palace to entertain him, but also I kind of liked how, you know how in a romance there's always the heroine who's sneaking into the library to read books, but we never really talk about little boys doing that. So I kind of wanted to have that aspect of him finding his parents' books and finding his mom's books and enjoying those. Because I think, and one thing about it is, so I was doing the Romancing the Globe series for a while where I would talk to people, romance writers from all around the globe, which hopefully I will have time to start again because that was really fun and I got to meet so many cool people. But when I spoke to Ankara Press, which is a Nigerian-based romance publisher. And when I was talking, one of the questions I usually asked was like, how is romance received? Like, is it gendered? And I believe it was Ankara Press, and they were saying, well, no, we grew up reading whatever there was to read, and there was no shame in a man reading a Mills and Boon because it was a book. You're reading a book. They're not going to make fun of you for, like, educating yourself or for using your education. So I just thought, like, and also in the Kingdom of Thessaly, there are like similar gender norms, but also I wanted it to be a bit more advanced. Like, there's no homophobia or, I mean, maybe some people there are, but in the society in general, there's not homophobia or anti-trans or anti-queerness or anything like that. And one reason for that is, if anyone follows me, they know I love Yuri on Ice, which is an anime that everyone should watch. It's an ice skating sports anime that's really a love story. But one thing I liked in the story is that everything was just people just dated whoever they want or had a crush on whoever they wanted, and there was no. Some people watching it like tried to be like project our society's like homophobia and stuff on it. But then at one point, the creator, Mitsuru Kubo, she said, I made this world and I can make it however I want. And that's something that really has stuck with me. Like, for some things I do, like, for example, when I'm writing the Civil War stuff, I can't just say, oh, everything was roses and, fine. But for this world and this fairy tale world and creating this fairy tale kingdom and basically building it from the foundation up, I got to decide how things could have been in this kind of place that was outside of colonization and stuff like that. So how things would progress and how the people themselves would react to things, and because I don't think it has to be natural that a society is homophobic. There's no reason
Quite
for
the
it.
opposite, right?
Yeah.
We're taught to
Yeah,
be,
exactly.
we're taught these things. And you actually create this kingdom, and we'll talk about that a little bit if you don't mind, and you create a religion. And it's almost kind of what I loved, again, coming back to him being, generally in rom-coms and in romance, you have, the heroine dreaming of this, prince who's going to come get him. But here we have a hero who the goddesses have chosen someone for. So from a very young age, he knows there is that one other half of his soul, and he completely believes that fairy tale on everything. And then again, being an only child, it fills that hole in him. Yeah. And he's kind of chasing that dream around his whole life. And so you have this, this flipping, again, gender reversal, which works really well, and it works even better because of this world building that you've done. So is this? So tell me a little bit about creating that religion and the country and what that's based on.
So for the country itself, I decided to make an imaginary country because when I first started it, I was imagining it as kind of like a quick Harlequin Presents, and like you get to make all kinds of fake countries and things like that. And it ended up turning out to be much longer and more involved than what I originally imagined it would be. But I was like, it would be something fun, a fun, quick read, and like, so creating the kingdom itself, I was kind of going along with, and also like in Princess Diaries and Coming to America and stuff like that. It's just fun to create a kingdom. It is based, a lot of the stuff in Thessaly is based on Lesotho, which is a real African kingdom. I didn't want to just set it in Lesotho, though, because I am American. I didn't want to just, go and take someone else's culture. And but I named it Tesla because I didn't want to also just erase them. It's, Lesotho, Tesla. I didn't want to just erase them, take stuff from their culture and erase it, so no one, if people didn't know about that, they would have no idea that there was a connection. So some aspects like the blankets, the cloaks, which if you've seen Black Panther.
The gonorrhea blanket. I'm sorry, I had to mention that.
Yeah.
Gonorrhea blanket.
These are hand-woven blankets. There's a gonorrhea joke. Not making fun of anyone with gonorrhea, but the virus shape. Okay, if you read it, you will see it. But I kind of wanted to pay homage to this culture, but not give my interpretation of that real culture. So I incorporated some aspects of that culture, some of other cultures, and a lot of stuff I just made up. But obviously, in making it up, I had to think about, at some point I might have absorbed something about, Yoruba culture or some other culture, and also African American culture and things that have passed down to African Americans through Africa, and like, for example, with the religion, which was really fun to me because I wanted them to have a religion. I'm not religious myself, but I feel like when you're creating characters, the majority of the world is religious and to varying degrees. And I think it's often left out of romance and out of certain novels because, that adds other things on, unless it's an inspirational novel. But I do think that novels can have people who are believers in a religion, and it doesn't have to be about that. It's just a background to their lives, just like so many people who are reading romance novels might go to church on Sunday, but they're not going to talk about it all the time or make it the central focus point of their life. But I also wanted that to be something that kind of kept the kingdom, was something for the people in the kingdom to rally around, and I wanted it to be matriarchal, and with some of which I also think would be a result in the more open kingdom itself, like as I said earlier with the world building, having more openness in the king and not judge. Yeah, right. The religion does not care about, and like in most places, homophobia is caused by people interpreting religion in a certain way. So if your religion is like, hey, it's cool, like explicitly it's cool, then there's no reason for it.
Right, which a lot of ancient religions were. Much less judgmental. And that's what it is. It's like spirituality is part of these characters without being, bringing the judgment of religion, or traditional religion.
Yeah, so it's more spirituality than regimented religion. They do go to the temple and have ceremonies and things like that. And also for that part, because again, I'm not religious, but I do think even if you aren't religious, you can witness religious ceremonies or go into a religious building and still feel really moved or feel part of something, because the best things, or one of the best aspects of religion, is the communal aspect and the way it brings people together. So I kind of wanted to show how that would work in Tesla.
And you do it really well, because it gives a root to that culture, and it's absolutely fabulous. And I think we're out of time, but there is one thing that we have to talk about. We have to talk about this gorgeous fabric on this dress, and the fact that you are wearing a shirt made out of that exact same fabric.
I am.
So you want to tell us a little bit about that?
The dress worked out really well. I did a podcast with Sarah from Smart Bitches about it, which was basically trying to figure out my own personal style, and I found this woman, a designer on Etsy, Adorned by Nicole is the shop, and she's like a really talented dressmaker, and she makes these dresses primarily with African print fabric. And so I would get those for going to conference and stuff, because in a way you're presenting, you're especially if you're an introvert or you're shy. And I used to be extremely could not even talk to people shy, which is why it's very weird to just be here having a conversation.
You're doing amazingly well, Alyssa.
I feel like after a few years in Rome, like if you talk to anyone who first met me when I first like joined my RWA, I was just like the person who would be sitting there like that. So that's a whole other story. But anyway, but like having the right clothing and stuff can make you feel more confident. But also we started talking about cover concepts, I wanted a way to show that this series is African inspired, and that they're African royalty, but I didn't want to get into any weird, you know, cover stuff can be hard.
We didn't want a mask on.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, we can, and like, you know, no one at Avon, no one suggested any masks. Just putting that up.
Thank you, Avon.
But so you know, when I went through the cover concept stuff and like what I thought the people looked like and everything, and I was also like, since you're doing a cover shoot and they get stuff for the cover shoot anyway, this designer does these dresses and it's like modern, but also African inspired print, and I think it conveyed well, and they were super into it. And yeah, so she did the dress for this one and for the second one, which is less African inspired print because the heroine is not African. That's about a secret Scottish duke, but yeah, so that's actually been really great, like working with her and seeing her stuff on the covers, and like it's just so distinctive. And
yeah, and to me it's you know, so you, because I've always seen you at conferences in her clothes, and I was like, oh my gosh, you should have just been on the cover yourself. So it's, but quickly tell us about Portia's book, about the upcoming book, when it comes out and what it's about, and then I'll take us out.
Okay, so Portia, in this book, Portia is her friend who's like a bit of a hot mess, who's like going out and drinking too much. She dates around, but she, you know, there's dates and like never settles down with anyone. She's not really looking for that. She has a twin sister who is successfully running, has started a like nerdish blog, and who also was sick and is now a wheelchair user. And Portia has always been the hot mess who kind of can't focus and is always trying something new and trying a different class and going to school again. Her family is rich, so she kind of is able to do what she wants. And her parents are always trying to get her to settle down, and she doesn't. So this book kind of, her book is, in this book, her and Naledi have a falling out caused by something she didn't do to be hurtful, but was hurtful in the end. And they reevaluate their friendship, which was already kind of in bad territory, even though they loved each other very much. So she's on, it's Project New Portia. She's trying to be organized, trying to figure out her life. And she gets an internship with a Scottish sword maker. Why? Because a few years ago I saw an article about a Scottish sword maker doing an internship, and I was like, that will be a great romance. But it also works for Portia. And I also got to call him and talk to him, and it was awesome.
Is he redheaded?
No, he's a silver fox. And this sword maker in the book is also a silver fox. I'm like, I want to be like, this is not you. This is just completely, like when I was talking to him, I could tell that he was like a little freaked out because I'm like, I'm a romance author and I'm writing a book. And he was just like, he was very nice. If you need a sword, go to McDonald's, Paul McDonald. But anyway, it really is not based on him, just the superficial stuff. So she gets this internship, and she's trying to find herself and be more organized. And it's about her kind of figuring, she's doing all, and she also has this, because her and Letty had this relationship that was kind of, they both had their holes to fill, and they were the kind of yin-yang situation, where she has always felt not good enough compared to her sister. She never lived up to her family's expectations, and she always feels like she is bad at everything, but in reality, she has so many different skills that she's good at, but she is always so down on herself that she's never realizing that she's doing, because in this book, you know, she's like doing this for Letty and trying to hook her up with this thing and that thing. So in the book, it kind of deals with like her reading about ADHD and kind of maybe this is what's going on. And that's not the main point of the book. It's like, you know, like the things in here, it's like the background story of her coming to terms with the fact that, you know, there's nothing wrong with her, which I think is the end point, the end goal of many romances.
Every romance, being well.
Yeah,
finding
finding how to come to terms with who you are and not compare yourself. So hers is not comparing herself to other people, figuring out her own strengths and how to use them, and not instead of only focusing on the bad effects of her personality, and also finding like accidentally finding out that her boss is secretly the love child of a Scottish duke who has passed away.
Nice. So it's also a regency in modern day. So it's a duke.
So it's basically like Pygmalion, but
nice.
My Fair Lady, but My Fair Duke instead.
That is, and it's called
a duke by default.
Nice. All right. Thank you so much for being here, Alyssa.
Thank you for having me.
It was fabulous, and we can just keep on talking. But we will be talking tomorrow at 57th Street Books in Chicago at 6 o'clock.
With Beverly Jenkins,
With Beverly Jenkins. So come see us there. And I'm going to say bye. And thank you again, Avon and HarperCollins, for sending us Alyssa. And Alyssa's book is A Princess in Theory, and it is this fabulous STEM heroine, and it's this fairy tale that's grounded very much in reality and current events. So please, you must read it. It's absolutely great. Okay, now upcoming shows, as I say bye, are come back to authorsvoice.net for Ladybird and Friends on March 1st at 5:30 p.m. with Sherry Dusky-Rinker. And the book is Tiny and the Big Dig. Ladybird and Friends again on March 6th at 1 p.m. Betsy Bird meets Kate Hannigan, author of A Lady Has the Floor. Belva Lockwood speaks out for women's rights. A House Divided on March 10th at noon. Meet Jan Jacoby, author of Young Lincoln. Stranger Than Fiction, March 15th at 3:30. Author Max Boot joins us to talk about The Road Not Taken. Solved. I'd love to say solved. Special, March 16th, featuring best-selling author Jeffrey Deaver's latest, The Burial Hour. That's March 16th at 3 p.m. Again, if you're watching on YouTube after the show, you can still order signed copies. Thank you so much for being here. This is Sonali Dev saying bye to Alyssa Cole. Bye, everyone.
Bye.